House Benghazi Select Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well. So after this investigation, I know it's still ongoing, have you determined who it was who made decisions on whether or not there'd be increased security at the Benghazi consulate from those multiple requests?
Well, we heard for several hours yesterday that it wasn't her. She was very clear about that she takes responsibility, but apparently not for the request for more security. We know the ARB went up to a certain level. We continue to believe, but we're going to have to develop the facts, that there was an intermediary level of scrutiny or leadership that escaped consequence. I'm not going to give you a name because it wouldn't be fair to that person, but I can tell you that if her position is, despite what the previous ARB said about taking personal responsibility and personally review it, if her position is that she didn't do it, then we need to find at what level that decision was made so we can make sure it never happens again.
All right. I assume that is it one person who got multiple requests? And has that person been interviewed by you yet? And if so, will that transcript be released?
That person has not been interviewed by us yet because, and you heard his name yesterday. In fact, you heard Susan Brooks say we have some of the emails, but not all of the emails. In fact, we don't have most of the emails. What's interesting also, Greta, is this person was actually part of the ARB selection process. So this person helped pick the members of the ARB who magically did not include him in the list of people to be disciplined because of the security failure. So,
all right, so why, we should know that person, shouldn't we? I mean, that should be out in the open. If we're going to fully investigate that, we need to know who's the one who got the requests and either ignored them or said no.
And you will know, I promise. You'll know when it ends exactly who that is.
Okay. Yesterday, there were lots of requests for the transcript from the testimony of Sidney Blumenthal. There was a vote by that saying that we can't have it. Why can't that testimony be released in its full in terms of transparency?
You know, Greta, I've probably been ruined by what I did in a previous life. I just don't think you ought to look at 1/54th of anything. And if you've done 54 interviews, and the only ones they're clamoring to release are two folks that were the closest friends of the former Secretary of State, why not the DS agents? Why not the contractors on the ground?
Why not those?
Well,
why not those?
To that point, I went downstairs this morning and I told my folks, send all the transcripts to be cleared. And when I say be cleared, I'm not going to have any identifying information that's going to jeopardize anyone. Send them all to be cleared. If we're going to release one, we're going to release them all because I want folks to see that this is a serious investigation into all aspects of Benghazi. And the best way to get that point is to look at all the transcripts, not one of them.
All right. So is there a commitment from you, minus the national security issues or someone's going to get hurt, that we will see all of Sidney Blumenthal and everybody else's transcripts? So there will be transparency.
There is there was going to be transparency no matter what. It's just a question of when. My preference was to wait until the report is released so you can cite the transcript with specificity and particularity. That's the way I think you run serious investigations. Congressional investigations are a little bit different. So they want me to release one transcript out of 54. That doesn't help anybody. So if we're going to release one, let's release them all. But I'm going to go through the proper steps and make sure there's no classified material. I'm not going to endanger any of the witnesses. But if we're going to release one, we're going to give the American people a full view of everything this committee has done.
All right. Well, I lean towards transparency for all of them. All right. Leader Pelosi today has said that Democrats may walk from the committee. Your thought on that if they do?
Well, they haven't been a ton of help so far, but I hope they don't. We have about 20 more witness interviews, including General Petraeus. We want to talk to Leon Panetta. We have to talk to Susan Rice as soon as we get the full complement of her emails. There are a lot of people that need to be talked to before we can conclude the investigation. And ironically enough, Greta, privately, the Democrats, while not terribly helpful, are more helpful than they are in public hearings. So I hope that they will stick around. But if they won't, we're going to keep marching forward no matter what.
Here's what I don't understand. Once our diplomatic post got attacked, it seems like our chief diplomat was in charge, where I think that it should have been the commander-in-chief and the CIA and the Secretary of Defense. Do you know where, for instance, the president was during those evening hours? Obviously, very different hours in Libya, but where was the president? Where was the Secretary of Defense? And where was the CIA director? Were they in charge of this?
Well, we don't know yet. The White House, we believe, has agreed. Unlike any of the other previous investigations, we believe the White House has agreed to make certain witnesses available to us that will help us better understand that. Leon Panetta is on the list of people to interview. We've already interviewed Mike Morrell. We just did it in private and didn't leak it. So after you do Morrell, Petraeus is the next logical step. There were reasons that we could not interview General Petraeus earlier, as you may recall. But all three of those names need to be interviewed, and because they will contribute to the mosaic or provide information that will enable me to answer your questions.
Do you agree with me that they're the ones that should have been in charge once we got attacked? I mean, that it's not even it's not even a diplomat's job. I understand why you interview Secretary Clinton. I understand her. You know, she's part of the chronology and the security. But it seems to me it's like, what in the world were they doing that night?
Well, I've been pretty clear, Greta, that of the three tranches with respect to Libya and Benghazi, she's integrally involved in the first one because that relates to the facility and the mission and the security. That middle tranche of our response during the pendency of the attacks, you've heard me say very little about what role, if any, she played or should have played. I mean, we learned yesterday that she didn't make certain telephone calls, but the reality is it's the commander-in-chief's responsibility to respond to military matters. And then the third tranche, the talking points, we did learn yesterday. We continue to see this public and private dichotomy between what's said privately versus what's said publicly. But Secretary Clinton is a very important witness for 1/3 of what we are looking at, that security piece. There are other witnesses that are more important for the other two.
What I didn't understand was towards the tail end of the 11 hours is that the secretary said something about looking big picture, that video, that anti-Muslim video still had some role. Maybe I'm getting this wrong. But, I mean, did you get the sense that she thinks the video was still part of this? Or, you know, at what point? I know that she sent that letter off to Chelsea, or that email off to Chelsea that night. But where do we stand on this video?
Frankly, Greta, I think it depends upon the audience. If it's a public audience, there is one explanation. If there's a private audience, I'm not going to discuss her email with her family. How about what she told another foreign leader? She told the foreign leader that it had nothing to do with the video. So there's this dichotomy between what we tell the American people versus what we tell folks in private. And you see that dichotomy not just with the talking points, but frankly, also with the emails. We're going to tell the American people we've turned over everything, but when it comes time to tell a judge, we're going to use a bunch of lawyerly words that nobody understands what they mean.
All right. I hate to be so hung up on this video, but, you know, from the very beginning, from the get-go, I thought it was weird. I thought it was very strange. Is there any email, and I don't mean to be into conspiracies, but to suggest that that was the line that was pushed because 5 days earlier, President Obama at the DNC convention had said that al-Qaeda was on the run, and he was still, even on September 20th, to Univision, which is 9 days after Benghazi, he's still pushing the video. So what was with the video?
Well, think back to Susan Rice's 5 appearance on the Sunday morning talk shows, and think back to what the State Department and others were saying after she went on and repeated the narrative about the video. They knew it was false. So I don't know why the president was repeating something for which there was no evidence other than the fact that and it's hard to recall now, but we were in the throes of a presidential race then. And as we alluded to yesterday, the narrative was GM is alive, Osama bin Laden's dead, and al-Qaeda's on the run. So the narrative that you cannot have is, well, al-Qaeda is actually not on the run. They're actually at our facility in Benghazi, killing 4 people and setting a place on fire. That's a narrative you couldn't have. So yes, they went towards the video. Well, what I have to prove, and is there actually evidence?
I mean, is there any email or anything so far in what you've seen in any way to suggest that? Because naturally, I'm curious too. Is there anything to suggest that they kept pushing the video thing because and that there's an email that said we got to keep pushing this because we have an election or something even remotely like that?
Well, how about the Ben Rhodes memo? How about the memo that started this select committee? which is that it was related to the video and not a broader failure of the policy. I don't know what gets any more clear than that you are instructing people to focus on something that is not true, so they will not focus on your broader policy in the region. I don't know what piece of evidence you'll ever get that's more compelling than that.
All right. I don't have it off the top of my head. Do you remember the date of that memo from Ben Rhodes? I can look it up. But
I don't want to give you the wrong. It was sometime in September, because that was what was used to kind of help the administration folks that were going to be talking about it. If you listen to the people who were in Libya and Benghazi, they were saying not a protest. And if you listen to Secretary Clinton's private conversations, she wasn't talking about a protest or a video. It was only in public, when it came time to talk to the American people, that we heard this spun up story about a video.
Was she fully cooperative yesterday? Are you satisfied with how she answered the questions? I mean, I don't know, you may have problems with her memory or whatever, but would you describe her as a cooperative witness?
Well, she's a good witness in that this is not the first time she's appeared before a congressional committee. When I say cooperative, I think you'll note, Greta, I didn't cut her off yesterday. I let her answer the questions fully. I thought some of our questions were different, but frankly, I thought there was a certain familiarity to her answers. She's had 3 years.
Was she being cagey and dodgy, or was she being straight?
I'm going to have to let others judge that. I think on some responses there was a certain level of candidness, and on some responses, for instance, what are you taking responsibility for? I frankly still can't tell you what she's taking responsibility for, because the 3 things we think she ought to take responsibility for, she's kind of pushed that off on other people. So I'm going to let other people decide whether she was candid or not. She was certainly not cut off, and she was certainly given every opportunity to answer the questions. I thought the questions were new, but I thought the answers were a little old.
In terms of the investigation, assuming that everyone complies in a reasonable time, and I realize that's been a struggle. You just got emails recently, and I understand that. When would you envision this being over, this investigation?
Well, I met with my folks this morning, and my timeline remains the same. I want us to be through interviewing folks by the end of the year. And there's certain parts of the report, to the extent we've already interviewed that body of witnesses, there's certain parts of the report that can be written before then. But obviously you have to talk to the last witness before you can cite any facts or certainly draw any conclusions. My timeline has not changed. I would like it to be done before the end of this year. But that timeline also is dependent upon the White House, the Department of Defense, and the State Department giving me documents. One thing we learned yesterday, Greta, and you know, because you were a really good trial lawyer, witnesses are great. That's helpful. Documents are fantastic because their memories don't fade, and they say the same thing today, tomorrow, and the day after that. So we really need the documents if we're going to be able to do the job that these 4 people deserve.
Do you have the sense, the sort of the guttural sense, that now the State Department has turned over every document it has, the White House has, and DOD has, and to the extent you get any out of the CIA? Or do you think that they're still sitting on some documents?
Oh, there's no question they are. They would tell you that. They would tell you that they still owe us documents. They owe us the emails of Patrick Kennedy. They owe the White House, the Department of Defense. The State Department owes us a lot of documents. As you know, in this type of investigation, I don't have that many tools to make somebody give me documents. I can't send a U.S. Marshal. I can't send the FBI. I can ask. I can hold them in contempt of Congress. But that's political theater, and I've really tried to avoid political theater. I want the documents and not the drama. But I mean, you got to ask the folks in the administration, or better yet, my Democrat colleagues, who frankly have not lifted a finger to help me get the documents. I'd be a lot closer to being finished if they would help just a little bit.
All right, you mentioned Patrick Kennedy, and of course I've looked through a lot of the documents. Is he the one who makes these security decisions? Has he testified before you? I mean, you said that you didn't want to name anybody, but his name sure has popped up.
Well, his name does pop up a lot, and he's testified before Congress before. There is documentary evidence that he is in the chain on certain security decisions, and he was not disciplined by the ARB.
Did he help form the ARB?
Well, this is what my limitation is in life. I want to give him a chance to explain it before I draw a conclusion. I know that doesn't work in politics, but it works in our old job. He needs to be given a chance to come in a transcribed setting and explain what role he played. I know what the email says. but I want to give him a chance to say what role he played in the selection of the ARB members and what role he played in the approval or disapproval of security.
Would you be willing to have the former Secretary of Defense, who was Secretary of Defense on the night of Benghazi, testify in open like yesterday with Secretary Clinton so that we can see, because we were under attack that night, to see what he has to say?
I would, to the extent that he can. I don't want to put him in a position because I think it actually is counterproductive for him to be able to say, I can answer that question, but not in this setting. He's written a book, so there's certain things I think he does feel comfortable talking about.
But here's the problem with if it's not out in the open, then everyone gets suspicious. Like if we can't have all Sidney Blumenthal, then we get suspicious. There may be legitimate reasons for everybody. I'd rather have it out in the open, and if we get to something sensitive, go behind closed doors. But at least err on the side of having it open, because otherwise everyone runs with it in terms of a conspiracy on a hearing, either Democrats or Republicans.
Trust me, I have lived what you just said. I have lived it. But you know who else was in town yesterday? James Comey. And nobody expects Comey to give them an update on the status of his investigation. And nobody expects Comey to say, this is who we've talked to and this is who we're going to talk to next. Everybody is okay with the fact that the Bureau is conducting their investigation the way that they're doing it. And so am I. I would not have it any other way. So if it's good for that kind of investigation, it's difficult for me to see why it wouldn't also be good for a serious investigation on this side. If I can do Panetta in public, he's a very well-regarded guy on both sides of the aisle. I think he'd be a good witness. If I can do him in public and have a constructive conversation. But part of what I saw yesterday, Greta, wasn't all that constructive. And for the American people to just tune into a 9-hour food fight, I would err on the side of a private one before I would do that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.